Una charla de Stinchcomb. Bueno, él es el primer empleado de Etsy. Etsy es una compañía, de alguna forma, que es un marketplace de todo lo que son productos hechos a mano, ¿no? O artesanía. Lo explicará él bastante mejor que yo. Pero bueno, es una compañía que ya tiene 400 empleados, está ya en varios sitios de Europa. Y bueno, de alguna forma es la prueba que productos, de alguna forma uno hace años no pensaría que la artesanía y los productos hechos a mano y los artesanos mismos, las personas que están haciendo pequeñas producciones, muchas veces en casa, tendrían una plataforma para venderlo y se ha transformado realmente en un éxito extraordinario. It's a pleasure having you here, and thanks a lot.
It's okay. I studied Spanish in high school. I was thinking I would try something, but I don't think I'd get very far. So I'm going to do this in English. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the story of Etsy and a bit about how we think about business in general. So Etsy started about 7 years ago in this neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. I was living there at the time with a guy named Rob Kalin, who'd end up being the founder of Etsy. But he and I had a screen printing business. We were making T-shirts, and I was trying to make it as a musician. And he was, this is Rob. He was a part-time furniture maker, part-time painter, part-time photographer, and then kind of accidentally stumbled into the web, which happened to a lot of us. I think, like a lot of creative people, it was kind of hard to cobble a living together. And actually, it's actually a pretty amazing story how he got into the web. Our landlord had his office across the street from our apartment, and Rob went there one day to basically tell him that he couldn't pay the rent. So if any of you are creative people, you know that this often happens. And he went in there to talk to the landlord, and on the landlord's desk there was a proposal from a web developer to build a website for a restaurant that our landlord owned. And it was exactly twice the amount of money that Rob owed in rent. And he's like, I'll do that website for half that amount of money. The guy's like, deal. So Rob went out and got an HTML book, having never built a website before, taught himself HTML, and then 3 months later he was the CEO of Etsy. So this is kind of how it happened. He was making these handmade wooden computers, and he built the cases himself. He really did it all, soldered all of the materials inside, and then wanted to sell them online. And since he'd learned how to make websites about a month earlier, he's like, I'm going to make myself a website to sell these computers. But then when he thought about it, we were making T-shirts and trying to sell them. Two of the guys that he met who helped him with that first website he built were animators and selling illustrations. And he's like, well, everyone's making stuff, but there's really not a great place to sell it online. There was eBay, but eBay had a lot of big corporations on it, and it really wasn't suited for people who really cared about the things that they were selling, right? If you're an artist, you want your work well represented. So, without any sort of business plan or idea if it would work, he made Etsy.com. So this was back in 2005. Now there's over 800,000 artists actively using Etsy. We are in, I guess, 4 languages, soon Spanish. We've transacted in 150 countries last year, and we're now supporting 31 currencies and really opening up places all around the world. So from the little Brooklyn apartment where we started the site, we've now got 400 employees, mostly still in Brooklyn, but some throughout Europe too. I should mention what is sold on Etsy. So Etsy, there's 3 things that can be sold right now on Etsy. There's handmade goods, vintage goods, and then art supplies. And that's it for right now. And what's really important is that these things are being sold directly from the people behind them. So it's all about direct connection between maker and buyer. This is an item from Etsy. This is my chart to show how the site's grown. A few figures for you. I think in 2005 we sold maybe a couple $100,000 of stuff, and then the next year it was $7 million. then 27 million, then 97, then 197, then 300, then 500, and this year will be probably another 70% over that. So it's moving in the right direction for sure. We have about 1.5 billion page views a month, 50 million visitors, and 20 million members buying from 800,000 small businesses on the site. But what's really exciting for us, far more than the business piece of this, is that behind every single shop there's a person. And in most cases it's a woman, actually, a woman who's running this small creative business. And this is when our thinking really started to shift around what the company was. I think in the beginning we're like, oh yeah, we're creative people, we're doing this for other artists, this is awesome. But when the site started to grow, we realized we were starting to have real impact on people's lives. And it changed the way that we thought about the site a lot. So this is a picture that someone sent me from a photo booth. It says, "True story, Etsy changed my life." And we began, I'd say really last year, we put on a big conference in Berlin. It was the first Etsy event that we'd ever produced ourselves. We'd travel around the world and we'd meet up with artists everywhere, but we'd never actually produced our own event. And so I was living in Berlin, running all of our European operations for the last 2 years. I just moved back to Brooklyn in May. But when I organized this event, I didn't want it to just be about, here's how you sell on Etsy, let's get started. We started thinking about something bigger, and that something bigger was, well, this is something that I wrote about what we were trying to do, but it was about thinking about microeconomies and why small local living economies are actually a far more sustainable path for the world. And this really got us thinking that, the real problem with a lot of the challenges that we're facing right now is that there's a very small number of very big things rather than a big number of very small things. And this is how we started thinking about business, that if we can help create all of these little microeconomies, we can actually start to try to do something that's better for the world. So there was a speaker at Hello Etsy named Judy Wicks. She started something called the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies in America. And she said this. I guess you guys can read it, but I won't read it for you. But this, really got me thinking too about Etsy, and how do we actually think about commerce not as just something that makes money, but something that actually can be an agent for positive change, positive social, ecological, economic change. And we completely, I think formalized the way we were always thinking about the company, but we decided to take real steps to actually really be a different kind of company. So we started thinking about Etsy's mission as, how do we reimagine commerce in order to build a more fulfilling and lasting world? So how can business itself be something that actually creates more value than it takes from the world? And we started thinking that, well, we already do that on some level, right? We're a for-profit company. But we give away 96.5% of all the money that we make. Everything's going right back to the people behind these products. And we've managed to be profitable since 2009. We managed to employ 400 people and create a whole bunch of entrepreneurial and social programs that help not only grow our business, but actually return a lot of value to the small businesses behind the company. And that, to me, is an example of a new way of thinking about business. And I really like this idea of business as unusual, right? Because business as usual has caused so many problems. How can you think about business as unusual? What does that actually mean? So for us, it meant, first of all, codifying what our values were, and then really trying to incorporate them into everything that we do in the company. And I thought business as unusual needs new forms of business entities. Has anybody ever heard of a B Corp here? Anyone? Anyone? Wow, okay. Well, you should hear about B Corps, because this is a really, really cool, exciting thing that's the construction that's started in the United States. The biggest B Corps are Patagonia. Ben & Jerry's became a B Corp actually last week. 7th generation, they make cleaning supplies, and Etsy is probably up there too. And basically what it is, it's a third-party validation process that you go through that basically says, you're not an asshole. Like, you do these good things, and you have to prove it, and you have to, always do these good things. So you can't greenwash, or just say like, hey, BP, Beyond Petroleum. But like, well, yeah, you just flooded the Gulf of Mexico. So this is a new kind of corporate designation, and we were really proud to become a B Corp this year. You have to have a score of 80 to become a B Corp, and we got 80.1. So we barely passed, but what it did is it created a framework for us to see where we needed to improve. And that's been really, really wonderful for us. So a lot of the things that we do to, kind of be a different kind of company, an unusual company, is we open community centers in the places where we have offices, and we work with the local community there. We bring them in. We teach them classes. All of them are free. We started something, well, we actually host something called Hacker School, where we teach people how to code. But we're not just people, we're very interested in how do we get more women in engineering. So we created grants for women engineers to apply to this Hacker School that we host at Etsy. And I think last year, before the grants, they had 3 women apply. And this year, with the grants, they had 700 women apply. So, these are little things, but they're steps in the right direction. Every month, we publish all of our business data in our blog, so our community can know what's going on. So we have a policy of just being very transparent with everything that we do. We work with all local vendors. This is something called Eatsy, where twice a week we have meals for our employees, and everything's local, organic, and seasoned, all that stuff. This is one of our engineers. We have a compost program that we do with a community garden in Brooklyn. This is right here. You can see the Brooklyn Bridge. That's the Manhattan Bridge. What we do is basically we compost everything in our office, and then we bike it down this community garden. We work with them. And this year, just in our office in Brooklyn, we've already composted 4,000 pounds of trash from our employees. That's Jacob. He's our office ecologist, the guy in the middle there. This is the garden. This is growing from Etsy's trash. We have something called Etsy School, where we give company resources and time for employees to teach classes on whatever they want. And then we started that as a pilot, both internally, kind of as an idea to allow people in the company to share the gifts that they have that they may not get to employ every day otherwise. But now we're looking to how do we expand this out to the communities where we have offices. So we're working on a pilot program with a public school in Brooklyn to actually offer entrepreneurial training for not the students, but their mothers. Daycare for the young students and entrepreneurial education for the mothers, most of whom are single and living in the projects across the street and have very little economic opportunity. So going back to the, I don't know if you'll be able to read this. I have got a close-up of it in a second. I created something in the company called the Ministry of Unusual Business, which is this kind of like fake Big Brother organization, where we put up posters around the office that the ministry is always watching you and everything like that. But it's all in good fun. The idea, though, is that unusual business is nothing more than the aggregate of everyone's decisions and actions. And if you want to build a truly remarkable kind of company, you need to make sure that it's inserted into the DNA of everyone in the organization. And so we started coming up with various frameworks for decision making, and found that there are kind of 4 main qualities to making an unusual decision. And so we work to create these frameworks and to educate new employees as they come into the company about how to approach problems. And the idea is that if we all make these decisions that think not only to cause no harm, but to maximize the benefit for our 4 stakeholders. And we believe that we have 4 stakeholders in our company. That's our investors, our stockholders, our employees, our community, our sellers on the site, our buyers on the site, the communities where we have our offices, and the planet. And so we basically have to think about each of those stakeholders when we make decisions in the company. So I don't know if you can read that. Yeah, I think it's legible. So this is something that we've come up with that we are trying to bake into everything that we do. So, the goal for the company and for what actually I do at the company, which is to kind of think about the values and the vision of the company, is to actually make myself totally obsolete, like my own planned obsolescence. So I hope that, in 3 years, this idea of unusual business is just usual business, not just at Etsy, but for anyone that we work with. The other thing that we do with all of this stuff is share it publicly. So as we create, say, frameworks for picking vendors, we'll email those to people or put them on our website. So anyone else who wants to do this stuff can do it too. We've got a goal this year to help, to try to get 100 Etsy businesses to become B corporations too. So we're going to set up a grant to actually help them pay the fees and go through the analysis of that. So I wanted to leave some time just for general questions. I'm sure you probably have just questions about like the e-commerce part of Etsy. We can talk about that. We can talk about any of this. But really, I don't generally hold anything back. So if there's anything you want to know about, I'm happy to answer it. Thanks. Any questions? How do we get the money? Good question. Yeah, who pays us? The sellers pay us. So we charge 20 cents to list an item for 4 months. When that item sells, we take 3.5% commission from that sale. We have one other significant source of revenue, which is we've built an internal advertising program on the platform. So artists can buy keywords, kind of like Google search, but internal. We don't have any third-party advertising on the site. We've also built our own payments product, so we can, we basically have our own internal version of PayPal. Why the name? I've never not been asked that. I was hoping someone was going to ask that. I always have a really unsatisfying answer too, and I'm going to give that to you right now. It was really funny. Rob came up with the name, and I was suggesting really awful names. And I didn't like Etsy at all. I thought it sounded really kind of cutesy, and now there's Foodsy, Gidsy. There's all these C sites. I feel like we started that. But the idea was to have a name that didn't come preloaded with a lot of meaning. Because what I like about Etsy, and this is the idea of the marketplace we make together, we don't sell anything, right? We're just the platform. So if all of the vendors decided they only wanted to sell lumberjack dolls, then we'd be a marketplace for lumberjack dolls. So Etsy is really just defined by whatever the community decides that it is. And so Etsy just means whatever it is. Is that annoying? Sorry. Any other questions?
How do you get to get a seller on your marketplace?
How do you
sign on to be a seller?
Yep, very simple. We don't actually do any sort of aesthetic judgment of what can be sold or who can sell on the site. As long as you're within our policies, anyone can set up a shop. Our policies right now say that the item has to be handmade by you. You can't be reselling it. Or it has to be vintage, which is we define as 20 years or older, or it has to be art supplies. To sign up, you need a valid credit card or PayPal and an email address. And it's that easy. You go, it's free to set up an account, and a digital camera or something to take pictures with. Good question. I don't know if you heard it. It was how did you get a critical mass? In 4 words? Oh. We focused a lot on bringing the sellers first. There's always that chicken and the egg thing with the marketplace. But we were really coming out of this community of makers, and there was a very strong pre-existing, what they kind of called like indie craft scene in America. And they really needed something like this too. We didn't necessarily associate like, well, we're part of this indie craft thing. We were just this kind of creative entrepreneur. And so we went into those places first where they were, and we focused a lot on building relationships with those sellers and building trust there. And so, hey, take a chance on us. It was free for the first couple months, and then we said, then it's going to be 20 cents. And we grow by the platform by giving people the means and the desire to bring more people to their shops, right? So the desire, I feel like we inspire by creating a brand that's transparent and honest and standing for something larger than just making money. But the tools are the tools that we give people to market their shops, and we create a lot of those for people to get their products off of Etsy. We focus a lot on bringing buyers to the site, right? That's a really, probably the most important thing you can do once you have some buyers there is help them sell stuff. Then they'll be interested in staying and promoting and growing the site. But it's been very much a word-of-mouth business. 96.5% of the gross merchandise sales. So we only take, what I was trying to say is that we only take a 3.5% commission.
Who are your competitors?
Good question. You know, I think that I could say like eBay or something, but they're so much larger than we are. It's you know, they should watch out, but no. It's a different thing. You know, I think it's the real competitors are probably, you know, Facebook, Square, like all of these things together, which are just tools for people that will become tools for people to run their own businesses. And I think that we need to make sure that people can run Etsy anywhere, not just on Etsy. I feel like the days of just having a website where you drive people to that web, you know, to sell, buy and sell there are old or fleeting, you know. And so now we need to make sure that, you know, Etsy's working online, offline. We have a mobile app that's been downloaded around 2.5 million times. We have mobile payments now. So really the bridge to the online world and the offline world is, you know, I think getting very blurry. You don't really have that anymore. So as far as competitors, I feel like it's, you know, when you think about Square processing payments, you know, it's just the next step for them to have a marketplace, or Facebook, you know, allowing people to sell directly to their friends and fans via Facebook. So, you know, of course we have local competitors in various international markets. But we're focusing really just on building the best thing that we can build and not worrying too much about that.
So could your competitors be your future partners?
I think so. I think that's the best way to think about competitors, especially as we broaden what Etsy is, right, beyond a marketplace. If you think of Etsy as a platform for small creative businesses, then any one of our competitors could use any one of our services, payments, inventory management, tax accounting, whatever it may be. So yes, I think so. Not yet. I mean, you mean like the shipping of goods. That's a big hurdle to overcome. I definitely see a future world that's very focused on local, that's focused on digital distribution of goods, that's focused on services. And then, of course, you know, people are still going to want physical products shipped all around. I get really excited thinking about new methods of production, like 3D printing, or, you know, because there's real people behind Etsy, and a screen printer in Brooklyn has the same skills as a screen printer in Barcelona. Could they email a file to that person and print it locally? So I think that there's really interesting things that you can do, especially when, you know, there's carbon taxes on things, or fossil fuels are scarce or prohibitively expensive. Right now we do partner with like Deutsche Post and Royal Mail and the US Postal Service, but we want to look to try to find solutions where we can actually help people with that. Because that is a big hurdle, especially if you're selling into the EU from the United States or someplace. When I was living in Berlin, I spent, you know, probably like an hour every couple of weeks going out to the customs office way out in the West and like waiting for hours to pay them like $2 on something. It was really frustrating. So there's some hurdles there for sure.
Fair.
Same?
So as we move to new markets, is the platform always the same? Is that what you're asking? Generally speaking, yes. The idea, our approach to internationalization was that, you know, it's a single global product made relevant to people anywhere. So we'll be launching in Spanish in the next couple of months. You know, we focus a lot on working with artists in a local community. That's why we have local teams in the places, in the countries that we support. So, I think that the relationships you have with the community are different in every place. And, I learned a lot of tough lessons moving to Europe and internationalizing Etsy. And, I remember going to Finland, and I was like, wow, yeah, this is awesome, Etsy! I was like all excited, and people were like, looked like I just killed their mothers, like, and I just didn't know that was like a Finnish temperament, that you have to respect and everything. So that's, of course, a generalization, but, I think cultural sensitivity is very important. As far as the product goes, of course, there are some variations. Germany, everything's done locally via bank transfer. There's various payment needs depending on where you are. But the core idea is the same.
First of all, congratulations for your project. Here.
Where are you?
Left.
Hi.
I think I've got an interesting product to sell. What steps should I follow?
Well, I think the first thing is, just don't be afraid to fail and go out and try that. Even if, you make something that you don't think is interesting, I promise you someone out there does think it's interesting. You'd be amazed at the stuff that sells on Etsy. Now, assuming you do have a universally interesting product, which I'm sure you do, I think the first step would be to really take great photographs of that product. There's a lot of tutorials. We have a whole seller education resource area where you can learn about product photography. That would be the first step. And then, the other step I'd say would be to meet other sellers in the community. We have something called Etsy teams. There's about 280,000 members of Etsy teams around the world. They're groups of sellers that come together around a shared artistic interest or a location. There is a Spanish Etsy team that are distributed across Spain. And they're a great resource just to bounce ideas off of people, to get advice, or just to learn business tips from.
Thank you. Thanks.
Do you promise any guarantee to the buyer?
Yep. So we do have a whole buyer-seller resolution area. We do have with our payments, we have guarantees, right? If something goes processed through Etsy payments, if it goes through PayPal, then they have their own separate way of dealing with things. Generally speaking, we try to have the buyer and the seller resolve the issue together. Since we're not actually selling anything, it's kind of like if you go to a farmer's market and you get a bad pear, do you get mad at the person who rented the booth to the farmer? Like, you would probably first try to go to that farmer, but if there's no recourse there, then we do help, and we do try to make sure. I think that there's also a feedback system. So you have some, warnings if the seller has a bad reputation or something like that. Anything else?
An office in a certain country.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Sorry, yeah. Hello. When is it that you decide to open an office in a certain country? And do you have an office in Spain?
Not yet. So I'm not. I moved back in May, and I no longer run all of the international. So it's not my choice anymore. I'd like to open one in Spain. It's beautiful here. We look, of course, first where we have traction in the marketplace already. Spain is not an insignificant market for us. It's not huge yet, but it's picking up. So what we'll focus on usually doing is starting with a small team, like 2 or 3 people, to organize community events, focus on press and PR in a given market, and just kind of start to try to build the seller community there. And then we'll scale up services as we need. But all of our engineering happens in Brooklyn. So all of the international engineering still happens from America, but they work with the local representatives there. So I don't know when we're going to come to Spain, but I hope we do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I was wondering, what was the main challenge here, over here?
Right.
Same direction as before.
Oh, okay, hi.
So what was the
Sorry.
main challenge for you to set up international operations, or like the example of Finland? what did you find most difficult, main difference between America and Europe?
There are a lot of, there were a lot of small difficulties. Nothing that was, so hard. I mean, I'd say entrenched kind of clone competitors who had a head start. That was a challenge in Germany. Is a challenge in Germany. I think just being dependent on PayPal was a challenge in a lot of markets where there wasn't high saturation of PayPal. Shipping is a big challenge. There was a whole, we started, our first international office was in Berlin. And so, there was a lot of kind of annoying tax stuff with Germany that we didn't really understand. We had to pay lots of lawyers and accountants, and all of my emails had a footer like this long on it with all this legal information because it was Germany. So there are little things like that we didn't account for. We didn't really know. We just kind of learned. So I think the biggest challenge for me was just being patient. Because you come to, when you come from America, you often are like, all right, we're going to get it done today. We got to go do this. And if you pay someone enough money, you'll have broadband internet, in an hour. But in Germany, it's like, yeah, we'll see about that in the next couple of months or something like that. So that was I remember arriving in Germany, and the first thing I was like, okay, internet. I got to get internet. So that was the first thing. That's where we started. I'm probably out of time.
Okay. Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks, all.